Okay, hi. This is going to be a quick tutorial on converting curves, generating some stitching patterns out of our topology in this shirt. But if you have something with pockets and zippers and stuff like that, you have some correlating edge loops that would help you in generating some stitching, you can use this method. And you can expand on it. I think this would be a great way for many people to be able to do that. And the tools are very rudimentary, but I think it works much faster in some cases than doing it in the brush, kind of more traditional brush approach that ZBrush and texturing approaches can, maybe like substance approach would be, which is also powerful, but I'll show you this one. So basically, I'll start by selecting non-intersecting edge loops. Non-intersecting, I mean something like this. When they intersect, that would be a problem on my mesh right now. And this is just for presentation. I'll just select these two because these are kind of ugly. So we have a whole bunch of edge loops, and the advantage of using a custom script for that is I can convert all of them to curves really fast. But if I want to go individually one by one, I would go under modify, convert, and then polygon edges to curves, but I would have to do it one by one. So here, as long as they don't intersect, I can select a whole bunch of them, maybe even like have a little like pocket seam, and then after that I'll have to separately select the ones that go in across if I want to have stitching go here. I could also draw curves on surface and adjust them and correct them, and that would also can be used to run my script. So once I have them selected, I will hit this button here, and that would generate all of the geo and all of the curves. And you can see, because my model is huge, and this is the way Tuber works. I'm sure you can watch a tutorial separately. Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording for a second. I have something coming up, and I'll return. Okay, I'll continue here shortly. So we can start by experimenting with one of the curves. So by hitting the Go button on the geo, we will be taken to the corresponding curve. You can also find all of your curves nicely organized inside of here. So we can see right now that the amount of CVs just doesn't accommodate for a stitching pattern that would be any good. So what I'll do is I will rebuild it. Okay, returning from my second pause. So, okay, still having to rebuild. Okay, so basically, what we're going to try to do is rebuild it to an amount that would make sense for a nice stitching pattern. So I'm thinking maybe something around like 250. Let's try 250, see what happens, and I'm going to hit rebuild, and I'm going to get something like this. Now, I want to kill history on my curve because it's been still controlled by the underlying geo, which I don't want because I want to start deforming it. And I don't want things to start conflicting with each other. So now, in order to select every second CV so I can generate my stitching pattern, I have to write a custom script, because mine doesn't offer, at least as far as I'm aware, any way of doing that. So I'm just selecting every index here of CV that the base basically is not divided by that's not an equal number, if that makes any sense. So what I end up with is every second CV. And then if I go out of my isolation mode here, not the physical one, as you might expect, but the CV isolation mode, I can start inflating every second CV. And what I would get here is this kind of a stitching pattern that can be useful for what I want. If I want my stitches to be a bit more wider, I would have to rebuild, like undo and rebuild my curve differently. but let's say I'm happy with this kind of result. Next thing I would have to do, so let's just go back to my selection there. I'm gonna inverse, I'm gonna select my curve. So right now I'm selecting the geo, and if I hit without the rebuild on the go button, I will have my curve selected. I would select every second one again, and maybe just inflate them slightly larger so I have a bit of a wider stitch pattern here. And now that I'm satisfied with this, I'm going to select all of my other curves. So if I go to my curve folder and I select all of these subfolders, I can select all of my other curves. And I'll give you another script. So let's see. Let's take this initial curve, or like its mirror image, and check the length of that thing. So the length of the curve right now is around 1000 and a bit. So in order to get the number that I want, I would have to divide it with, what is it, 250, I think. So I'll have to divide it with 250. Oops. So let's see what it gives me. It gives me 4.58, right? So that's the number I'm going to put here. And that way I can have all of my other curves that are of different lengths have the same subdivision amount. So basically what I'm going to do is run this script on everything, and it's going to rebuild all of my curves. So there I go, running my script. And now that I go here, you can see that all of my curves have equal amount of CVs. Or at least the distancing. Like the amount would be different, but the distance between each CV point is going to be similar. Very, very close. So it will give me the same stitch pattern. Now that if I go here and I select component mode and control right click and drag to control vertex, I can select all of my control vertices, and let's see if I can do this for all of them at once. And looks like I can, which is wonderful. So now if I go out of my isolation mode and I scale those guys down and then invert selection and scale them up, hopefully, just hopefully. Oh, my bad. I forgot to kill history on them. So let's select my curves, object mode, kill history, and then go to component mode again, select everything, do my filtering, so only every second one is selected. I'm gonna get out of isolation so I can see the effect. Scale them down, invert, scale them up, and then maybe invert again and have a bit more precise, controlled way of scaling them up. Something like this. And now if I zoom out, you guys can see that I have a stitching pattern. It's a bit slow, and in some areas you might have to go in and kind of scale some of them in. Again, I'm not using any fancy scripts for the moving of the points. I assume if this becomes popular, I could actually, if this method becomes more popular, which I don't know if it would, but for me at least, it saved me some time in certain cases where I've really needed a quick way to follow around an edge loop, especially if the shape was very complex and I was like, okay, I'm not painting that. So in this case, again, I can go back to my CV selection, and just around this edge, if I move my pivot point a bit lower, I could scale them a bit down and have a bit more something that looks more like a stitch pattern and is crashing through the geo the way I want it to. So now, after I'm finished with all of this, I have my extracted geo folder, and I can export it with my main mesh into Substance Painter, and actually have stitches, and you can always go in. You can see that in some areas it doesn't follow perfectly, so you can always go in, isolate that area, select the appropriate CVs, and you can move left and right and control your stitch just like that, right? So you have a bit more control like that, and we can always move our curves on surface. So that way, also by hiding our group of the group that controls the oh my god, what's the word for that? The screen space folder that basically controls the extrusion shape. I forgot the word, but I hope you understand what I mean by that. The viewport would move much faster because all of that hookup and whatever. There's a certain way that Maya works with that stuff that just slows down the display. So by hiding it, you can speed it up quite significantly. And again, we can come in here, and you can see that because I scaled from a higher position for this two, it moved those inner CVs higher up, which is not necessarily what I wanted to do. Let's get rid of, and so I can just move them down and have a bit more of a, let's see, yeah, can have a bit more of a nicer stitch pattern that way. Here I think I scaled it a little bit too much. You see it completely disappears. But yeah, that's the trick basically. You can see that here it works almost perfectly all the way around. We just have to make sure that our this underlane mesh, you might want to actually do it on a higher mesh, actually subdivide it once more, or get your high resolution mesh and then do it on that. And that way you will preserve more of the detail to align better with your shape that you want to bake from. Especially if you're baking from like a high subdivision mesh, maybe bring it to Maya and snap those curves to that. But hopefully this helps. In some cases, this is a much faster way of doing it than doing it by hand. So I'll share the two scripts. They're simple. You can easily modify them. This here at first, this is unimportant, so I guess I'll comment this out. But what I can do with this, if I hit the print, I can figure out, okay, how am I going to subdivide? Let's just get rid of this. Like, how many points am I going to get just by the length of the curve, and by how many, like, how much do I have to divide it? So if I already rebuilt one, I can decide how much I will have to divide the rest of them by their length to get the appropriate amount of CVs. I hope this helps. I hope this is not too technical. And if you need help, let me know. Good luck.